No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to talk about something that jumped into my head after my recent interview with Matthew Confer, which is going to air in a few weeks here on Hacking Your Leadership. And I want to talk about kind of an interaction he and I had, and it really stuck with me, and I thought it was important enough to talk about in an episode. He was talking about how in this mid/post-pandemic world, how a lot of things have had to change for him that have been a struggle for him. He used to get so much energy out of meeting with people in an office and sitting around a table and looking at people and talking with them, and that hasn't happened as much because of social distancing. And he noticed that what has happened is that instead of meeting 10 times a week for an hour, he's meeting with the same team of people 40 or 50 times a week for anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes. And it was just kind of like an anecdotal way of saying something, and we moved on. But that stuck with me a little bit on, wow, like just the logistics of how we operate are completely different right now. And I think a lot of people are struggling with this because they think that any change is bad, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Are you changing things about the way you act mid and post-pandemic, where you've had to kind of throw out some old ways of doing things, and they might be uncomfortable to do so?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great call out, and I think a lot of leaders and like a lot of people that write into us and message us, and leaders that I talk to on a daily, weekly basis, like a lot of us, like everybody's just struggling to figure this type of thing out, because even if you were previously in the virtual world, so many things have happened in regards to businesses and things that we've talked about, people being furloughed, people being laid off, companies closing, offices being reimagined, more people working from home. Like there's been so many changes and disruptions to what we would quote unquote call our normal, that when you're thinking about being a leader in this space, a lot of times the burden on the leaders to be the person that can provide inspiration and direction and, kind of peeking around the corner.
Answers.
Answers, right. And so I found myself, in a lot of spaces where I'm just saying, like, actually, I don't know. I have no idea. Like I'm learning the same as you right now. I know it's not a great answer, but it is my answer. All I can talk about or we can discuss is like, well, where do we go from here? What are the things that we were used to having? And at the end of the day, I think to answer your question, like, what's the end goal we're looking to achieve with this? Like, if we're talking about, from a leadership standpoint, the development of our people, how do we still make sure that connection or that development is happening or that dialogue is happening, even if we used to really rely on our, to his comment, our connection as humans being across the table from one another, or just being able to have that 5-minute conversation in the hallway or behind over here or at the water cooler or while having a coffee, like all those little things and those small conversations that would happen over time that would either help to provide somebody with necessary, thoughts, feedback, or coaching, or give them a little pick-me-up or check in on them with something that's going on. When you don't have that in the physical space, you either have to figure out how to do that in a virtual space or it goes unanswered. So, yeah, I think there's been a lot of things that we're continuing to work through, that I'm continuing to work through as a leader, that we haven't exactly figured out just yet as a result of all this pandemic stuff.
Sure. So I want to start by saying that, because you said it right at the beginning here about we should know the answers as leaders. If you're a leader and you're listening right now, if you don't know this already, you should. And that's that it's not your job to necessarily have all the answers at the moment you're asked, but it is your job to make sure that you're on a path to finding those answers. That is your responsibility as the leader. So don't stress out over this concept of, if your people come to you with something, oh my gosh, I have to avoid them until I have the answer, until I figure it out on my own. Engage your people in the process of finding these answers together. They'll be more bought into it anyway. So don't stress out over not having the answers. None of us have the answers. But the conversation with Matthew made me think of some of the things that I heavily have relied on in terms of my leadership and my connections with people. And I'll give you some big examples. There's a word that I've been using recently called SMILE, spelled Smeyele, and it's how I smile with my eyes. And I started using that word because of all the times I have to be out in public wearing a mask. And if I'm out in public and I'm wearing a mask, my go-to is to make people feel like they're welcome to come talk to me. I want to be approachable, and I've always done that with my face and my smile. I've tried to. It's so much harder to do that now with a mask on. So how do you make sure people understand that you're approachable? When you're in a room with people around a table and you're hashing things out, there's so much you can ascertain from a person's feelings and emotions by the subtleties in their body language. Just because you know who they are, you know that if a person is looking up and to the left, what they're thinking or that they're processing something, you know if a person seems like they're feeling anxious, you know if a person seems like what they just heard from somebody else in the room isn't rubbing them the right way. It is so hard to know if that's what something that was said is doing that to people over a Zoom call. It's just not possible. Even with the most high definition 4K cameras on everybody, it's hard to do that because you're not looking at everybody. You're not seeing the fidgeting in the chairs. So there's this element of how we relate to each other and how we kind of empathize with each other, or at least feel like we're in tune with each other, that just doesn't happen anymore. And I struggle with feeling like I need to be able to still get that from people, and I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think that, for a lot of people and a lot of leaders, that are used to that physical element of an environment where you can connect with people and see all those small nuances, to move into the virtual world. And I've shared it and I've talked about the fact that it's a little bit of a struggle. Like we do this podcast, you and I record the podcast, and we look at each other over Skype, and we record the audio and we post it as an audio. So I'm used to being in front of a camera and having conversations with people. I'm not used to leading people in development and having virtual meetings and having a screen full of 16 faces, and then being able to, to talk and land things with, with relevancy and with emotion, and then also allowing people to have the kind of, it's like, to your point, like, you can read a room, you can kind of go through, let's start, hey, let's go around the table here, and kind of, I want to hear from everybody. Well, then what happens when we have maybe a virtual meeting where there is no camera on and it's just audio? And you have no idea, what they're seeing or feeling or hearing, and that type of like it just, there's so many dynamics in that. So I think that it's something that I truly believe a lot of leaders like yourself, like myself, are all trying to figure this type of thing out. But I love the point that you made. It's like, we don't get to opt out because it's weird or different. I've been saying that a lot recently, and it's probably annoying some people at this point, to be completely honest with you. It's like, when you sign up to be a leader, when you say, I want that title, I want the responsibility, and I want to be held accountable for the development of others, that doesn't mean that you get to opt out when it becomes difficult or weird or different or hard. Yes, it could be. This is a really unique situation with so many things going on, from the pandemic to social justice and all these types of things that are happening in our environment right now. And yes, it can be frustrating, and yes, it can be different and stressful. And yes, you could say, as a leader, I've never actually had to deal with this in my career before, so I'm really concerned and I'm really trying to figure this out. But as a leader, you don't have to have the answer, what you said. You don't have to have the exact strategy, but you must be down the path. You must be then reaching out to your mentors and your peers. You must be talking to other leaders and saying, and opening up and saying, as a leader of people who really, really cares about my people, I'm struggling with this and I need help, and I need to talk to somebody about this, and I need to either consume content, I need to watch videos, I need to do something that will give me an element of personal growth that allows me to show up for my people. And so I think that's just that's where a lot of people are right now in a lot of these spaces. But as a leader, you don't get the option to say, you know what, it's too much, or I don't know how to do this, so I'm not going to do it. You have to go down that path, and you've got to leverage every relationship, network, mentor, friend, boss, peer, anybody at all that you have that can help you work through it. Now is the time to do that, because you are responsible for other people, and you've got to be able to show them that this is the path that you go down when you run up against some of these hurdles.
Yeah. You actually can opt out. You can choose a different career path.
Quit.
You can
sure.
quit. Yeah, exactly. But you can't opt out of the responsibility unless you also opt out of the paycheck too. You have to step down from whatever that job is. I look at my kids' schooling right now. and there was so much turnover in their school district from teachers who were not of retirement age. I mean, we're talking like school teachers that were in their 40s to early 50s, and a lot of these teachers literally quit towards the end of the summer, and there was so much upheaval in the district because of that. And it was basically just all these teachers who said, you know what, I went to school to be in a classroom with these people. We're not able to come back. We don't know how it's going to be. I'm not good with technology and Zoom calls. That's not what I signed up for. And in my mind, I was thinking, you know what, teach their own. If you want to quit, that's fine. Go ahead and quit. But on the flip side, what did you actually sign up to be in a classroom, or did you sign up to teach people? Did you sign up to teach people? The world said you can't teach them in person anymore. So what did you do? You could do two things. You can say, okay, what is the new world, and how do I still make sure that I'm doing what I said was my life's calling or what I wanted to do? Or do I say, never mind, it wasn't really my life's calling? And I think if you're a leader of people, it's the exact same thing. If you truly envision yourself as a leader of people, then what that means is that you understand that you have the responsibility of people's growth, development, and potentially their lives, their professional lives, their lifetime of potential income making or wealth or ability to retire or ability to have a great work-life balance with their families, and how that bleeds out into the lives of their children. There are so many things that you impact as a leader. If that's what you signed up for, there's no reason for you to opt out just because the world has changed. But if you did opt in for that, if that's what you want to do, your job now is not to try to hang on to whatever you had in 2019 and try to shoehorn it into what 2021 is going to look like. Your job is to say, okay, these are the things I cannot control. It's the old the Alcoholics Anonymous, grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, right? Accept the things you can't change and instead find a way down that path with your new reality, because that's how you're going to get a lot of personal satisfaction out of still being able to be a leader to your people.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you know what, like, hats off to people that say, like, the kind of the teacher example, leadership example. If you say, I cannot deliver the output that I feel is quality as a result of these changes or my inability to make this happen, and so I'm going to opt out, like, hats off to you, right? Like at
Sure.
the end of the day, like, because that's a really tough decision. That's a lot of self-awareness. That's a lot of understanding what you're capable of doing. And if you feel strongly like, I cannot show up and deliver a product or a service or a development or whatever my job is as a result of these changes, you know what? Like, hats off to you. Like, good, that means that you have a level of self-awareness that is going to lead you down the successful path, no matter what you get into, which is fantastic, I think. But evolution, progression, change is the only constant. Like, that is just the tenets of being a leader. Those are the things that you must just accept when you have the role. If you want to be successful in the role and you want to be a good, effective leader, the reality is, like, we just got a steroid shot this year.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, right? And much of it forcefully, and things that, like, if you ask me what hey, Lozo, do you have a preference? Would you rather have this happen over the course of a year or two, or 1 or 2 months or 1 or 2 weeks? I'm gonna be like, give me the long game, right? Like, let me wrap my head around it. Let me think about it. Like,
of course,
what would this look like if in 6 months or a year from now, half of my time would be in a virtual world, and how would I, we didn't get that option. It just happened. So, like, because of the speed of it, I think what we have to also think about in this space is that you've got those leaders and people in organizations that would love to do nothing more than slam on the brakes as this is kind of taking off, and stop the change from happening and stop the progression, and just think about and believe that how we used to do it is the way that we should continue to do it. And then you've got people that are right behind them that are like, hey, if we're going around this curve, the best way to get around this curve is actually hit the accelerator. Right? And I think that the problem that I see, and I think is going to be, across industries, across organizations, is you're going to hit this bottleneck where you've got people that are there in the way saying, we can't go any faster. Matter of fact, we need to stop. And because they can't move quick enough, they can't evolve their talents, they can't spend the time in their own development in getting out of the way or utilizing their network to get better quicker, and they're going to stop the people that are like, no, we can actually go. Like we can do this. Like we can take what we stand for as an organization. I can take my leadership and I can double and triple down in the virtual space, in the physical space. Like you've got the people that have maybe either grown up in this kind of very quick, fast-moving internet world, and those that are used to that type of change and embrace it and want to move it forward, they're going to get stopped, and they're going to get slowed down by people who are archaic in their thoughts and in their leadership potentially, and that's going to be a larger problem. And so, like that's where my head is at, is I'm thinking about how do I make sure that I can show up for my people and my team in a way that is necessary and expected from me, but at the same time, how can I kind of get myself out of the way if we need to move faster on things that maybe I'm still learning as a leader that I have to get more comfortable with?
Oh, 100%. There's the idea of a remote work environment from the perspective of trying to create a better work-life balance for employees has been around for decades already. The results-only work environment is almost 2 decades old in terms of companies that have tried it and attempted it. The companies who are moving more towards a virtual space where you have kind of like a building you can go to if you want to, or maybe you go to once a week and then you work from home or from the beach or from wherever you want to work with. These are things that companies have started to try to implement as perks to attract people for more than a decade already. It's so if you look at what is actually changing, a lot of it are things that we actually tried to make happen anyway. So if you want to wrap your brain around what's actually stressing you out, it's not what's happening. It's the fact that it was taken from our control of making it happen at our pace to the world made it happen to us, and now we're having to react to it. But where we're going is no different than we would have ended up. The amount of people working from home right now, I don't believe is any different than if the pandemic had never happened compared to the amount of people working from home in 2030. 10 years from now, this many people would have been working from home anyway. This many people would have been in a remote environment where you could have work-life balance, work the hours you want to work, collaborate when you want to collaborate, have the relationships you want to have the relationships with. We just didn't get a decade to practice. That's the only difference.
Yeah, and I think that we also didn't get the decade to develop leaders to understand how do you take the things that have always mattered in leadership and apply them to what this looks like. Because if you give me 5 or 10 years to think about, so how would you do these things, with your team? How would you develop people? How would you empower people? How would you provide the same level of leadership quality to your people, but you're going to have to do it, from the house in front of a camera in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. It gives me a lot of time to self-reflect, develop myself, consider these things, build out strategies. Like that time that you would have to build that out, we just didn't get. And I think that's really what's causing a lot of potential frustration and a lot of leaders to have great opportunities in this space, is that we didn't get that time to get better at that type of space. But again, I think it highlights my point, is that there are leaders who have done this and have been working on this and have been doing this type of work and have figured out how to make this happen. And we cannot get in their way from helping us to get there faster.
I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
Okay, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get your pen and paper out, and I want you to do something very different than what we've said before. I actually want you to just journal. I want you to write down all of the things as a leader that may be causing you anxiety, things that you may be telling your people or telling your teams that, hey, you've got this, I got confidence in this, but at the end of the day, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and this makes me really nervous, and it makes me really scared. I want you to just write all of those things down, and whether it's a behavior, whether it's leading people differently, whether it's working in the virtual world, whether it's dealing with social issues, whatever the things are, just journal all the things down that are causing you some anxiety and stress right now. Then I want you, when you're done with that, I want you to go back and I want you to look at each one of those items. And I want you to think about and write down the name of the person that is in your personal or professional life that may be able to help you work through it. Somebody that you could talk to about it, somebody that you know that you can trust. It could be a spouse. It could be your boss. It could be a peer. It could be somebody that you have not talked to in 10 or 15 years that you worked with a long time ago, but they were the first person that came to your mind when you thought about this very specific thing as a result of an experience you may have had with them. But I really want you to spend the time self-reflecting and thinking about this, because I think for all of us to get better as leaders, we're going to have to lean on other leaders in our lives that can help us work through the things that may make us really uncomfortable right now, because this is what our people need from us.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a fantastic 1-minute hack. I saw a clip on LinkedIn a few days ago that was a Simon Sinek interview, and he was talking about optimism, and he talked about how it is so much easier to be optimistic when there are people out there who can say, I have your back. And when you talk about looking at who your network is and who you can reach out to help you through these things, the fact that you have those people, that in and of itself is going to make this process easier for you to get through and for you to be more likely to succeed. So really, really consider those words. Who out there can say, I got your back? Who can you say that to? Because the people you're going to reach out to ask for help through this process, you might be that person for somebody else, and you need to be prepared to have that conversation with them as well.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.